like to call to order the Citizen Advisory Committee meeting for May 27th, or no, June 23rd, I think, 24th. I was looking at the minutes. So we'll start with public comment. I have one speaker card, Ralph Hoffman.
Good evening, committee members. Ralph Hoffman, representing the Citizens Advisory Committee and the Sierra Club. We have representatives up in Washington right now lobbying Congress to pass the carbon tax. But what I'm going to be speaking about in my public comment, I was weeding through my old files this past weekend, and I came across the voter information pamphlet for Measure J, which was passed in November of 2004. You all should have copies of it in front of you there. And also what was given to voters was the whole expenditure plan for Measure J, but that would be quite different if we were to put it on the ballot in 2016. And just leafing through it, first there's a sort of a summary of what Measure J money would be spent for. This is a continuation, of course, of the measure that was passed in 1988, excuse me, November of 1988. And so there was no increase back then, just a continuation for 25 years. And a county council's neutral analysis of the measure, and then the arguments in favor of Measure J. And then if you flip it over on the third page, you will see the rest of that arguments for Measure J and who endorsed it. Many of those people are still in office or other offices today. And then on page 4 are the arguments against the rebuttal, and then flipping back over onto that continues on to page 5, and then the arguments against Measure J. And if you notice, the organizations and the people who voted or argued against or recommended voting no on Measure J, they are still in many of those same capacities and active in political office today. And then the last thing at the bottom of page 6 and into page 7 is a rebuttal of those negative arguments on Measure J. And I just thought you all might find that interesting, an interesting document if we should, the surveys and everything should indicate that we have to get a 2/3 vote, of course, to pass Measure J in November of 2016 to raise it to 1 cent. Thank you.
Thank you, Ralph. We'll pass on to the approval of summary of actions for the last meeting.
Move to adopt.
Second. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Okay, passes unanimously. Call your attention next to the attendance log. Make sure that your attendance has been recorded accurately. And we move on to the meeting calendar. The only thing I do want to point out is that in keeping with the usual practice of the authority, we will have a July meeting on the third Wednesday, but we will not have an August meeting. the authority pretty much goes dark, except for very high priority items during the month of August. And finally, and this especially for the newer members, make sure that your entries on the roster are correct. Also, although I presume Diane has been telling you, if you will give Diane the round trip mileage from your home to this location so she can enter it, we do receive mileage for attendance at this meeting, if we come in our own cars, or transit fares if we come by transit. Any changes to the roster? Let's see. We have one new member, but here tonight. You'd just like to introduce yourself.
Good evening, members. My name's Dennis Fay. I'm a resident of Moraga and representing the city here. Previously lived in Orinda and know the gentleman across the way here. And hope to be an effective member.
Janet, did you ever get a chance to introduce yourself?
Sure, I'm Janet. I'm from Pleasant Hill, and I like biking here.
And I don't know if you ever had a chance to introduce yourself.
Millard Larkin II. I'm representing Antioch. Very proud of my city. I like to call it the city of growth.
And I don't know whether we ever heard from you, Patricia.
I represent Contra Costa County. I'm Patricia Bristow, and I live in Byron.
Okay, thank you. We'll pass on to our major discussion items. The first discussion item is a review of the City of Antioch's calendar years 2012-2013 Growth Management Program Compliance Checklist. We have a couple of people here from the City of Antioch.
Good evening. My name is Lynn Filson. I'm the Assistant City Engineer for the City of Antioch, and with me is Alexis Morris, a Senior Planner with the City, and we are here to answer any questions that you might have on our checklist.
Any members of the committee have any questions for the City of Antioch?
Hi, I'm Linda. Thank you for being here tonight. I really just have some clarity type questions, if you don't mind. On page 7, 2.1-11, under action plans, you list a number of upgrades to the streets, action 4, action 11, concrete repair, action 14. I was just wondering if all those have been completed, or are they still in the works?
Those are all completed.
Thank you. And then I have a question on page 8. I think it's page 8. Under transportation mitigation. You make reference to, in 2012, 50% rebates were given to single-family homes to reduce the fees charged. My question is, the 50% rebate, does that come from Measure J funds?
We will have to get back to you on that.
Okay.
Neither one of us was actually here in 2012. We've had quite a bit of staff turnover. I know the city of Antioch is very involved with the East Contra Costa Regional Fee and Finance Authority, and is, you know,
Right.
one of the main providers of funding and money to get state and federal money for the Highway 4 widening.
Okay. Yeah, I was just clarity. I just found it. Oh, here,
Sounds like-
Martin will help you.
Martin Engelman, Deputy Executive Director for Planning at CCTA, and I do know the answer to the question, so I'll
All
help you out.
right.
It really wasn't a rebate, it was a discount, and the fee was double that for some time.
Right.
And then when the Great Recession came and housing starts stopped, to kind of make it a little easier on the builders, they reduced the fee to half, but that was not backfilled with any kind of public funds.
Oh, okay.
So Measure J did not pick up the other half.
Yeah, that's all I wanted to know is where the funds, if funds had come from somewhere, where did they come from? Thank you, Martin. Okay, well, that was the end of my questions. So thank you.
Ms. Rockin?
Yes. Just a small question. I see a lot of building, of course, a lot of activity going on with respect to transportation changes in our area. But I'm not so sure that I understand the opportunities that come for residents for jobs. What kind of programs do we have, and how many training and employment opportunities are we creating for residents? I know that employment is a big concern in our city.
I don't have a perfect answer to that. I mean, we have an economic development staff member who works individually with businesses to either recruit them or help support them in recruitment. She works with the county. But in terms of formal workforce training or recruitment that the city is sponsoring or involved in, I don't think we have any. I think we work closely with the county. But I can get back to you if we have any specific initiatives.
Okay, I guess under housing options and job opportunities, what have we done to address?
The city has quite a bit of land set aside for planned business centers, business park zoning designations. We have several different zoning designations that allow the development of employment generating uses. We have millions of square feet actually set aside for that type of land. Some of it's built, some of it's entitled, some of it's in the pipeline to get approved. The city has set aside land as in a capacity of our land use authority to do that. We can't develop it or that sort of thing, but we can certainly facilitate development by laying out processes that have the least amount of land use entitlement restrictions when folks come through, having as many things that can be permitted by right as they can be, rather than going through lengthy approval processes when businesses do come in the door and are ready to move in. We have economic analysis that we do for projects to make sure that if they wanted to put some retail in what might otherwise be an office area, that they're not negatively impacting the overall amount of employment generating square feet there are in the city. So we are mindful of the necessary balance, but we sort of deal with it on a project by project basis.
Okay, I guess what I was looking for was, is there any legislation in place, for example, if new developments come up, that there's opportunities created for training or employment, as well as a certain percentage of housing that would be designated for, low or marginal income. As well, I'm wondering, with all of the changes that we're seeing with respect to widening Highway 4, with the E-train that's going to Hillcrest, I'm concerned. My concern is, are residents benefiting from that economically by having opportunities? I see a lot of folks working, and in my morning meetings at Starbucks, one of the main concerns that I hear over and over again from citizens is that homeowners, community leaders, is that they don't feel like there are enough opportunities. And I think with opportunities, it directly helps to, lower crime and also create a tax base. In other words, I guess one of the concerns is, do the tax dollars leave Antioch rather than, developing some, if not now in the future, that can contribute to our general fund, would help support better safety, our police department, things of that nature. And that's what I was referring to.
The city doesn't have any policies that require for in terms of housing opportunities. The city doesn't have any policies that require a certain percentage of housing to be affordable. For example, in the new project, we don't have an inclusionary housing ordinance or anything like that. We have, relatively speaking, affordable housing, but it's not officially affordable in terms of being income restricted or that sort of thing. People have to come to the city to develop that kind of project. We don't have any policies on the books requiring it at this point. In terms of job and economic opportunities, like I said, we have millions of square feet set aside, some of it already built. The whole EBART area has a specific plan that envisions housing, jobs, and commercial all within a very close proximity to the future EBART station at Hillcrest. We have specific plans in the eastern part of the city that require housing to put in infrastructure for commercial in order to help facilitate that, roadways, utility infrastructures to help get the jobs there, to help get the infrastructure in place so it's more ready to go. But again, those are specific plan policies or land use, but we don't have any specific policies that you have to have workforce training as part of your project, or you have to provide affordable housing. Not yet.
Okay, but that's something we'll probably look into in the future, maybe. Okay, thank you so much. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Any other members have questions? I have one. There is a development that when it gets developed, the developer will complete the cut-through of Laurel Road to the interchange. Where does that stand?
We have an entitlement application for that property. The application's called Laurel Ranch. The development's called Laurel Ranch. It's about 100 now. I think it's about 189 units. To the south of that, there's an application that's been approved called Park Ridge, which is 533 units, plus or minus. Either one of those projects will have to complete Laurel Road to the interchange, or both, depending on timing. The Park Ridge project, like I said, is approved, but they have to final their maps. They're going from north to south, so the Laurel section of their project would be last. The Laurel Ranch project was just submitted, so they're probably a year to 18 months from having any sort of maps submitted to the city for if their project is approved.
Yeah, because out there we're looking the completion of that road segment to greatly facilitate the movement of emergency vehicles, among other things. Well, if there are no further questions, it's our custom for the representative of the city being reviewed to make the motion to recommend approval.
Absolutely. I move that we approve the compliance checklist and move forward.
Who had the first, second? All right, you can have it. All right. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Passes unanimously. We proceed on to the second item of business, which is the review of the City of Pleasant Hills calendar years 2012-2013 Growth Management Program Compliance Checklist.
Good evening.
Evening.
My name is Eric Hugh. I'm the senior civil engineer with the City of Pleasant Hill, and with me tonight is Troy Fujimoto, our senior planner for the City of Pleasant Hill. And yeah, we're also here to present our Measure J calendar year 2012-2013 compliance checklist. But before we delve into that, I just want to point out that the City of Pleasant Hill, we're actually very heavily using our Measure J funds, our portion of the Measure J funds. We built a number of projects in the last couple of years, and many of whom, actually, some of you may have driven some of those streets on the way here tonight. Buskirk Avenue realignment, Contra Costa Boulevard improvements, Geary Road. These are all projects that are funded, a good chunk of it funded through Measure J funds. So it's obviously important for us to have our checklist done properly and approved by this commission. So with that, I'll take any questions you might have.
Question? I saw your Gary Road project yesterday. Is that going to go all the way down to Contra Costa Boulevard?
No, that project is, first of all, it's a joint project between Pleasant Hill and Walnut Creek, and it'll extend from Pleasant Hill Road to the west to Putnam or Buena Vista to the east. The section between Buena Vista and North Main, the area that you're thinking about, it's already been done by the City of City of Walnut Creek a number of years ago. So the current project is kind of a phase 2 or phase 3 project. Yeah.
Thank you.
Hi, thanks for being here. And I just want to talk about the Contra Costa Boulevard improvements that you were talking about before. Is that the one from Chilpancingo to Willow Pass?
To Viking Drive.
Okay, great. I just want to say I was right behind the painters, the street painters, as they were laying it down, riding my bike, and I ride it all the time. I think that's an excellent use of Measure J funds. It expands the bike lane without really reducing vehicular traffic, but it feels much safer because of the painted barrier, so thank you for that. I was wondering, as I was biking down that today, there are gaps. For instance, before you reach there, if you're still on Contra Costa Boulevard heading south and passing the Target area, for instance, there's no bike lane. I saw somebody riding the wrong way on the sidewalk. I myself took the entire lane, which makes drivers very happy. And I was just wondering, how are we going to address making our streets complete?
Well, Contra Costa Boulevard, as most of you know, it's the closest parallel route to 680. Before 680 even existed, CCB was the state highway through this area. And so a lot of the facilities were designed back in the 30s, 40s, built and redesigned in the 60s until recently when we started doing these projects. Needless to say, cost of construction has gone up dramatically since then. So in essence, on Pleasant Hill, we broke up Contra Costa Boulevard in many different phases, block by block per se. And the project that was done last year was the 3rd or 4th phase out of total 7 phases, at least within the City of Pleasant Hill boundaries. So we have future plans for other blocks that haven't been improved yet. One more phase is coming up next year. But that's just one of the things that we just keep on continually tackling on year after year and trying to get Measure J or federal funds or all of the above. I know the project last year was funded through 5 different grant funds. It was really complicated. It took a number of years to secure the 5 different pots of money. We're still trying to, close out different pots with different agencies, but that's unfortunately what it takes. And so all I can say is right now we have one more phase coming up between Taylor south down to actually Harriet south down to Beth. That's going to be in construction next year. And we're looking at securing funding for the phase 6, so to speak. That's between Viking down to Harriet. So, yeah, and that's why funds like programs like Measure J and the upcoming TEP program, which some of you may have heard in these discussions, is so important. And CCB is for Pleasant Hill is going to be on most of the major grant call for project lists and for the next 4 to 5 years for that reason. So.
Great, thank you.
Any other members have questions? I understand the Geary, I go up and down that section of Geary Road twice a week. I understand that project ran into some delays when there was unexpected barriers on the underground infrastructure. Things weren't where they were supposed to be.
Yeah, I mean, that tend to happen when you're installing or excavating and installing a new storm drain 12 feet down beneath the pavement. You'll hit everything dating back to the 1800s. And so, plus I think they were installing a culvert, a 42-inch culvert, right across Geary Road at one point. So it tend to happen. Yeah, a little bit of delay, but my understanding is we're back on track, on schedule.
Yeah, it looks like it.
Yeah, I mean, on the Pleasant Hill side, I know we're done, so they're now working on the Walnut Creek side. The good thing is most of the storm drain improvements that's crossing Geary Road, which could have problems, that's already been installed with the Pleasant Hill side. The second phase, the Walnut Creek side, for dealing with sidewalks and paving and just storm drains underneath the sidewalk, those should have a lot less surprises. So we do anticipate the project to be closed out or completed on schedule by the end of the year.
I saw that it was quite a bit of infrastructure improvement was made part of that project. I can see the size of the storm drainage installations that are going in. And I'm glad to see it. I'm glad to see it's going to be done fairly soon. They seem to be moving along pretty quickly. I think a lot of people do not realize how much infrastructure goes on underneath if a roadway or highway project is well planned. If you're going to disrupt the area, you might as well do it just once. And I certainly see where there's considerable improvement to the water handling capabilities and other things, as well as the traffic signaling is taking place as part of that project. So I congratulate you on that. If there are no further questions, do you want to make the motion?
I move to pass the compliance checklist from Pleasant Hill.
I have a second. Second by Manina. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Passes unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you.
Now, for our third item, we have a presentation on the CCT's real-time ride-sharing program.
Thank you. My name is Paul Steinberg. I'm Chief Business Officer and Captain Carpool for Karma. And I want to thank you for your time. I've had a wonderful opportunity of presenting before the Contra Costa Transportation Authority Board of Directors, and this is my first time before your group, and I appreciate the opportunity, and hopefully I can educate you a little bit about some of the projects we're doing in your backyard, and hopefully enlist your help to grow them and make them even more successful. So what I want to do is kind of first briefly give you a little bit of background on Karma as our company, and then I'll dive into specifically the projects, the pilots, and the grants that we're doing in partnership with Contra Costa Transportation Authority. And the general mission or problem that we're trying to solve as an organization is the daily commute. So congestion in America is primarily during the 3 hours in the morning and evening. And that is a problem that we've been trying to solve since 2009, since we started as a company named Avago. We've rebranded our name to Karma, so sometimes if you do some Google searching, you'll see quite a bit of history as Avago. But you guys suffer through the same problem as most Americans, and that is getting to and from work is generally a very long, painful process, and most of us do it driving alone. And our objective in life is to try to convince you to change your habits and share that seat next to you that's empty with a stranger or a coworker or a neighbor, so that you can get into the fast lane, the HOV capacity, but more importantly, get fewer cars from point A to point B. The benefits are, one, safety. Highway statistics show that you're a third less likely to die in a highway accident if you're driving with 2 or more people. So that's the most important statistic that most people don't think about. And the reason is you're on better behavior. You're not distracted. You're not playing on your phone when there's someone sitting next to you. So it does make you safer when you're driving someone else to work, as well as obviously it's faster and you can save quite a bit of money, which I'll get into. Team Karma has been around since 2009, as I mentioned. I'm one of the 4 co-founders. Probably our best known co-founder is a gentleman named Sean O'Sullivan, who I've had the benefit of working for off and on for 30 years. He's the gentleman who invented desktop mapping, so type in an address on a computer and get a map. He invented that 10 years before Serge graduated from high school, the gentleman who started Google. He's also the gentleman who coined the term cloud computing that we all throw around conveniently. It was him and a gentleman from Compaq Computers invented that in the mid-90s. And he's actually a well-known investor, having invested in Netflix, a Guitar Hero. He was the 15th largest shareholder of Apple Computers when Steve Jobs returned to the company. But he's also an extremely well-known philanthropist. He has a Jumpstart organization that has 4,000 volunteers that go into civil and Rust countries and rebuild schools and orphanages like we did in Iraq after the second invasion. He also is the largest donor to a lot of educational nonprofits, including Khan Academy, which is based here in the Bay Area. It's an online education, Princeton education for anybody. And we started the company to solve this problem, which is the daily congestion, the daily commute. How do we get people to give up their vehicle, or if you're not going to give up your vehicle because you live in a suburb and it is the only option you really have, to at least share your seats so that we can increase mobility throughput, more people through on the same infrastructure that we have today. The apps or the services that we offer span from our original product offering, which is peer-to-peer carpooling. It's basically a smartphone app that you download. You enter your daily commute habit, so the days of the week that you're willing to carpool with someone going to work, your starting address, your ending address, and then there's an online technology that goes off in the background and finds good matches for you. People who live in your neighborhood or work at your same employer, travel the same time frame as you, and it suggests that you carpool with them. We call this peer-to-peer carpooling. We also offer, most recently, fleet-based carpooling. This is where we provide the vehicle. So similar to casual carpooling that exists over the Bay Bridge, where strangers line up on the street corner, a car comes by, and you jump in with a stranger to go over the Bay Bridge to save time and money, we're introducing fleets of cars. There's 50 of these orange-wrapped Mazdas. There's one in the garage if you'd like to look at it, that are high-end vehicles with leather and Wi-Fi and power at every seat. And just like casual carpooling, you can walk up to it like a car share, but you can't start it unless you got 3 or more people to go through the HOV lanes of the Bay Bridge. Once you got 3 or more people, it unlocks and it goes into Bishop Branch, which is in Contra Costa and San Ramon. And the idea is, again, we're trying to reduce the volume of vehicles that are going on and off of this very important campus in the East Bay area. And then as of last week, I'm proud to announce that we acquired, or absorbed is the term used, we absorbed a nonprofit in San Francisco called City Car Share, which is also a partner of Contra Costa Transportation Authority. And that provides us with an entire fleet of 450 vehicles that we can also use to, again, move people during commute hours, but then they can help us repurpose those vehicles during the daytime while sitting in a parking lot as a car share. So you need to go to lunch, borrow it for an hour. Or on the weekends, which is actually the most common use for car sharing, use it on the weekends. So that acquisition or absorption is allowing us to expand our product line, and our objective is to provide you with peer-to-peer or fleet-based solutions for car sharing. If you don't want to own a car, you can simply walk out your door and borrow it by the hour. or carpooling. So if you do elect to own a car and you live in the suburbs, that's fine. That's great. We just ask that you try to share your seats at least once or twice a week to help reduce congestion. We are not what's called a transportation network company. This is a general term applied by the state of California CPUC, California Public Utilities Commission, for services such as Uber and Lyft, which you may have heard of, which are ride-hailing services. These are basically the replacement or a new generation of taxis. We do not fall in that category. In fact, we were important and instrumental in federal legislation that defines and protects real-time ride-sharing or carpooling. And we are protected under California law with CPUC that our riders, our drivers are not violating any laws. As long as you don't earn more than 56.5 cents from your neighbor getting reimbursed for gas and mileage, then you're not a taxi driver. That's the same thing that's been around since the 70s. We want you to do that. We want you to carpool with your neighbors and your friends. And that's 100% protected on your insurance and liability. What we build is a connected commuting platform. It's kind of technical term, but basically what this is some software that we've invented that tracks how many people are in a vehicle. So we have patents that identify if this phone is traveling with another phone of someone else, or if I just happen to have two phones in my pocket and I'm trying to cheat the system, we happen to know that, and that's based on our patents. And we use this information to determine occupancy and apply it for certain uses. The obvious use is carpooling, right? Trying to find a match so we can go to work together. That's about occupancy. But the more important uses of that are to increase the amount of throughput on our existing highway infrastructure. So as you all know, we're out of money and we're never going to get enough money to build more and more roads. We can barely maintain the roads we have today. So the US DOT is gradually moving away from a vehicle throughput model to a passenger throughput model. And that's what we're about, is tracking how many physical people are in each of those vehicles. And the things that you can do with that include providing free discounted tolls or occupancy-based preferences based upon vehicles that have more people inside. And so I'm going to give you some examples of what we're doing around the Bay Area. So around the globe, we're actually doing automated tolling discounts. What this means is in the state of Texas, in Central Texas, they started with a pilot that they wanted to provide a discount. If you drove on the toll road and you carpooled and you shared that information of your carpool with the government, they wanted to give you a rebate on your toll. Those of you in the Bay Area may remember we used to have free carpool bridge tolls over the Bay Bridge. And about 4 years ago, when we introduced congestion-based pricing, we added tolls for carpool use. And what happened is something that we could have foreseen, and that is half of the carpool traffic has disappeared over the Bay Bridge. And the reason is twofold. One is there's no more as big as incentive for that driver, and so now they just choose to drive alone. But there's still a huge time advantage over the Bay Bridge because you don't have metering lights if you get in the carpool lane. And so there's still a time advantage, but it just so happens that time is not a huge motivator for people. It's a subjective concept, and people don't think about their time. You may be frustrated in traffic, but by the time you get to work, you've forgotten about that. So money is the biggest motivator, but not money as in the sense I'm going to bribe you or cash, give you a little bit extra cash to change your habit, but a tax rebate. And so this pilot we did in Texas, we learned that the adoption, the number of carpoolers in the neighborhood prior to the rebate and after the rebate. In California, prior to this test in Texas, we would just argue you could save time, save money, and save the planet. And you could earn maybe $20 a week carpooling. In Texas, UC Berkeley suggested we change the messaging. It's the same product, the same offering. The difference is we don't say you're going to earn an extra $20 towards your gas each week. We say you're going to get a $20 rebate on your toll tag. They thought we'd get a threefold increase over our adoption, the number of people who download our app and use it 6 months later. In Austin, it turns out fivefold increase. It's significantly a huge human behavior change. And because of that, BATA and MTC have since copied that. And now in the Bay Area, over all 8 Bay Area bridges, if you use Karma Carpool to carpool, with 2 people, you get a half-price bridge rebate. With 3 people, you get a full rebate. So tolling is a big use of our application, being able to measure how many people are in a car because you no longer need a cop on the side of the road to look in and peer in. You can simply apply discounts based upon people's usage of technology. We're also doing work in the autonomous vehicle world so that if you know occupancy levels, Autonomous and connected vehicles are going to offer the opportunity for fewer accidents, but it also offers opportunity for faster throughput if you know occupancy. If you have a street intersection with 4 cars on both directions, but in one direction there's 1 person in each car, but in the other direction those are all carpools, 2 or 3 or 4 people, you can actually change that street light based upon occupancy, giving preference to the road that has the most people trying to get through it. We also have this partnership, as I mentioned, with MTC and BATA. This started about a year ago, long after our project initiated here in the Bay Area, and this is something that they promote on their ride-sharing page. We're the only private vendor up there today. They promote casual carpooling and kind of a custom, static, old-fashioned ride-share system they built, and then, of course, Karma. And that occurred after we kind of helped them out a little bit during the BART strike, and they realized how much carpools could help get people over that bridge. SFMTA, we have some partnerships with. They actually, inside of every parking garage inside the city of San Francisco, you'll see our posters, which talk about this free bridge toll if you'll carpool in the city. And you get half-price parking in the city of San Francisco if you hold up our app to prove that you carpooled into the garage that day. They're also helping us on this new fleet-based car sharing by providing us with reserved parking spaces in key parking locations around the city. So these cars can be centrally located for you to walk to and then carpool in and out of Bishop Ranch. Now I want to get into what are we doing here in partnership with Contra Costa Transportation Authority. And first I have to give some kudos out to the agency itself. Because in 2011, Contra Costa Transportation Authority submitted a grant to MTC that was cutting edge. It was visionary. It was way ahead of its time. It was talking about doing real-time ride-sharing long before you ever heard the name Uber and Lyft. And I have to commend Randy Wasaki, who leads the agency, but also Martin, who's sitting in the back, who spearheaded this project, which was very unique at the time and very progressive and very unusual at the time to try to convince people to carpool in real time using smartphones. But since that time, after $2 million+ being awarded to Contra Costa, Marin, and Sonoma, real-time carpooling has gone from sort of a pilot phase to a permanent infrastructure piece of MTC's alternative transportation solutions. And being on their website as the only private vendor is a testament to the vision that CCTA had to try to push forward with a concept that at the time was unknown and foreign. I remember the first meeting before this board was all about safety and security, getting in a car with a stranger. Now move forward 5 years, and of course we have Ubers and Lyfts and people getting cars with strangers all the time, and I never get that question anymore. But it was really the vision of Martin and Randy to take a risk, really, to lead you guys down a path that has turned into something that is now a permanent part of the Bay Area. We also have done some expansion of casual carpooling. So casual carpooling is the kind of idea where you stand on a street corner, a car comes up, you hop in, you go over the bridge, you get dropped off at a terminal. And that works over the Bay Bridge because you have HOV3 capacity requirement, which there's a lot. It's easy to get a spouse or a coworker in your car, but it's hard to get that third person. And that's why casual carpooling works over that bridge. And what we wanted to do was to test how can we move that concept, that organic carpooling concept, out farther into the suburbs, farther into the East Bay, to get more people driving? Because right now the phenomena that happens is people will drive from Pittsburgh, Antioch, all the way to Oakland by themselves and then get off to pick up that 1 or 2 persons just to go over to Bay Bridge as an HOV3. We want that HOV3 decision to be made way out in the network, farther out. So there's about 20 of these bus stops in San Ramon that we're doing some testing on converting existing public right-of-way, a Contra County Connection bus stop, into a safe, secure area for a carpool to pull over and pick up somebody. And so these are all red curbed areas, nice and safe. They have a nice sign next to the County Connection sign. And this is a way to kind of extend out the casual carpooling network that we're all familiar with, but farther out into the suburbs. And you'll be seeing more of this as we expand with Contra Costa. We have a new project starting right now. It's a value pricing, VPPP. I don't know what the third P is, but value pricing grant is a type of grant. The first project that brought us to the Bay Area was a CMAQ grant, a congestion mitigation grant. The VPP grants are generally for technology testing. And this is a project that we're launching right now with Peter Engel along the I-80 corridor. And this is the same integrated corridor where you have these dynamic message signs. This is a symbolization. This is not what's going to be on your sign, but the idea is that INRIX data is what's being used to calculate those travel times. Those signs that you see on the travel dynamic mesh signs are calculated by a company called INRIX. And INRIX has a lot of smartphone apps that people download. They have sensors that are reading in the highway. So there's a lot of different aggregate inputs they're taking. But they aggregate all that. So they know the general travel time along the corridor, but they don't know the difference between someone driving in the general purpose lane or the HOV lane. But that's what we know. We know the actual HOV times. So what we can now present in this project is if we know that INRIX is telling you it's 44 minutes to Berkeley from a particular point, but we know from the HOV usage of Karma that it's actually only 28 minutes in HOV lane, we're hoping that we can push to our app in real time that information and suggest to people to pull off on the side of the highway to a park and ride and pick up one or two different people so they can get into that express lane. And try to change your behavior in the moment when you're frustrated. Because we know from human behavior and work with UC Berkeley that if we wait till you get to work in lunchtime when you see someone handing out flyers, you're past that anxiety and you're unlikely to change. But if I can hit you while you're stuck in traffic, while you're frustrated, while you're yelling at the guy in front of you, that's when we have the best chance of opportunity to change your behavior. And so that's what this pilot is all about. And again, it will extend and expand upon our bridge toll program that we already have in place. We also have a new program that we just launched last week in and out of Bishop Branch I was mentioning. These are fleet-based vehicles. It's a partnership with Mazda. These are high-end CX-5s with leather outfitted seats, neck pillows, Wi-Fi, water, snacks, magazines, earbuds. The idea is that it's as comfortable as what you hear of as a Google bus, but it's for the rest of us. It's anybody who wants to go to Bishop Branch can just walk up and take a ride. You don't have to be an employee of some special firm making $300,000. And the price is 40 cents more than riding BART, and it takes you an hour less. So if you live in San Francisco and you take BART to San Ramon Bishop Branch, it's about a 45-minute BART trip to Pleasanton or Dublin, and then you wait about 40 minutes for a free shuttle that takes you. It costs $5.10 for BART. This service is subsidized by Bishop Branch, Chris Weeks, and the cost of riders is the same as riding their express bus. It's $5.50 each way. So $11 round trip. It would cost you $11 just in tolls, another $11 in gas. It's a better car than you would drive. No gas, no tolls, no parking. You just show up, you go, you get out of the car, and you'll see an electric scooter over here. Here's one of the last mile solutions we give for people at Bishop Branch. Electric scooters, electric bikes, and electric cars to get that last mile to their actual door-to-door employment. So that's a little bit about Karma. I think we have a lot of projects going on with Contra Costa. We have an I-80 carpool or real-time tolling project going on. We have a Bishop Branch fleet-based carpooling project going on. And then, as I mentioned, we recently absorbed or acquired City Car Share, who is about to launch an electric car share program. Is it electric car or electric bike? Electric car, isn't it? I think it's electric car share program here in Contra Costa. So you guys are probably the most important transportation authority in the Bay Area for Karma as far as who we do the most projects with. And the reality is you're generating the most traffic and the most trips counts, if you will, for carpooling. So you are the most important in our world because you are the source of SOV travel. And together, hopefully, you can help us with trying to get access to park and ride lots where we want to station these cars going to Bishop Ranch. We want to place them in Antioch and Pittsburgh. We want to place them in Pleasanton. We want to place them in Fremont. The idea is we want to get all these congested corridors feeding in and out of San Ramon with fewer cars. And once those HOV lanes or managed lanes kick in, there will be even a financial incentive for people to carpool. With that, I want to thank you very much for your time and your ongoing support. If you haven't heard about us, please look us up. And again, if there's anything I can answer for you, or more important, if there's anything you think that your city can do to help us expand the reach of this important pilot into your cities, please call us. We'd love to work with you. Thank you so much.
I have a question for you. You talk about expanding out to Pittsburgh, Antioch area. Hopefully you will be approaching the Tri-Delta Transit. Just like
I have not.
Kind of connection.
Yeah, I have not,
I'm sure
but
that
I
they'll
would
be
love
open.
to. Is that something you could provide an introduction?
I think so.
Fantastic. But you're absolutely right. So what's happening right now is there's a survey going at Bishop Ranch employees, the 35,000 employees. There's a heat map being created. If you go to a website called gokarma.com, you'll see little green dots with the 700 or 800 people so far have said, I want a trip in my neighborhood. And based upon the interest level, Chris Weeks is positioning these cars in these remote neighborhoods where he can't run a bus or justify a bus. But Pittsburgh Antioch is already on that list because we're working with Bank of the West. That's quite a few employees out there, as well as Oakland is also on the list for another employer. I forget the name, but they recently relocated from Oakland to Bay Area. But we will be in your neighborhood, and we are going to need parking for these vehicles in right away, and so I would love the introduction. That would be great.
I have a question. I may have missed this. Are you a for-profit corporation or a not-for-profit?
So Karma Technology is a for-profit company based in Ireland, but we go to market. We're kind of a pseudo-government because we go to market. We will only go into a market hand-in-hand with a signed contract with the DOT, the Federal Highway Administration, and local transportation authorities because our founder is a billionaire. So yes, it's for-profit, but we don't need money. What we're trying to do is change policies. So at the federal level, for example, we had some legislation passed defining real-time ride sharing to protect van pooling and carpooling. But at the local level, we're working with BATA. What we want to do is remove those Bay Area bridge tolls. That's what this test is about, feeding them enough data to prove that we can change behavior if you remove those tolls so we can change that. We're working with MTC to create more HOV3 lanes. We want more of the HOV2 lanes you have in the Bay Area converted HOV3. And then we work with cities like City of San Ramon and Lisa and folks to get permits for local level. So our approach to the market is, even though we're for-profit, is hand-in-hand with the government. But you made a good point, which is we just acquired or absorbed a nonprofit. And people want to ask, what's that mission and is it compatible? And our mission is about reducing congestion, and the mission of City Car Share is about increasing mobility to the less privileged or the less fortunate. And as part of this process, we are actually going to refile as a Corporation B. So Karma will still live as a separate entity, but we will become a B corporation, which has a social purpose type of corporation. And then City Car Share has to remain. So you don't ever really dissolve the nonprofit. The nonprofit is just now under our kind of family. But back to your answers, Karma as a company will retain its private status but convert to a B corporation. City Car Share will always remain a nonprofit.
Okay. I have a second, with your indulgence, Mr. Chair.
Sure.
You, at the beginning of the presentation, talked about using the smartphone to detect how many people were in the car. Is that any smartphone? But it's your proprietary applications that detect this. Can you tell me a little bit more about how this works? And I assume everybody in the car has to have a smartphone.
Yeah, actually, it's a little more sophisticated than that. But we started in Europe. We're an Irish company. We started in Europe, and then went to China, and then last came to the U.S. But in Europe, and in China, we actually had the #1 bus transportation application in China. It's called Panda Bus. And in Europe, we do ticketing systems. So in the U.S., y'all are just now moving to Clipper, where it's a single payment card across all your service offerings. But in Europe, they're way past that. Everything's with a smartphone. There are no card payment systems. And our patents are around knowing when this device is traveling in partnership with the bus and when it gets on and off the bus. And that's how we calculate how much you should be charged. And that's what our patents are around. But back to your question, to participate, like in Texas where we're doing tolling enforcement. In the case of tolling enforcement, where it's not an opt-in, meaning you have to provide ladders of accessibility to everybody. So in that case, you either need our app installed on an Android device or an iOS, so an iPhone or an Android, or the TxDOT. If you go to textag.gov, which is the government agency that issues that toll tag like Fast Track, you'll see our banner on the homepage, and they'll give you a free beacon if you don't own a smartphone. And that comes from us, but it's a $4 disposable battery-operated Bluetooth low-energy beacon. And the purpose of that is for everyone who doesn't own a smartphone. You give it to your children who are too young to have a smartphone. You give it to the elderly senior citizen who has a flip phone, doesn't have a smartphone. And that is your equivalent of a smartphone that we are tracking in combination with these other devices. So TxDOT, where you have to provide accessibility to everybody, simply gives that away like a free toll tag.
So does that mean that if I'm monopolizing the questions, please just stop me. I'm pretty interested in this stuff because I had quite a bit to do with starting the express lane on southbound 680. And I'm wondering, is your technology such that you could use that technology to identify whether the vehicle was a single occupant vehicle or whether it had two or more people in it.
I don't want to set myself into a political battle with BATA, so I'm going to politely just talk about Texas, maybe, because I don't want to get in trouble, because those are my friends.
I'm going to take that as a yes, you can do it. You don't need to go further.
Technology, today, you can actually do tolling without a infrastructure. We can tell where you are geographically. We know what lane you're in. Smartphone technology with these little beacons glued to a wall can do all that stuff. The reality is DOTs are 10 or 12 years behind technology curve for many good reasons, right? And so they would never deploy that today, but TxDOT, which is sort of a leader in tolling in this arena, has an RP on the street today, which will be a state mandate replacement for how they do occupancy enforcement today. So in the case of California, 5 years ago or so, they elected to go with a fast-track switchable tag, which is an honor system, and you still need cops on the side of the road because you're still going to have the same fraud. It's going to defer a little bit of fraud, but you're still going to be in the multiple double-digit fraud range. This solution that I'm talking about is less than 5% fraud, but it does require some configuration before you deploy it. But TxDOT is already moving away. They will move away from, they're going through the process of legislative change that they don't have to catch you cheating and give you a ticket afterwards, that they're going to change all their managed lanes, which you're about to deploy, to be as soon as you enter the road, I think 30 seconds or something like that. But as soon as you enter a road, you're agreeing to pay the full rate unless you improve your way out using technology. And it's written in a way that a smartphone app such as Karma could be the selected tool for that. But they will move all the toll roads there. And the test that pilot, which I could share data with you in Austin, proved that the fraud is less than 5%, and it actually increased toll revenue on those roads by 7%. Because the people will use that road more when you give them a free ride when they're carpooling. Yeah.
Paul, I appreciate all the concepts that you're espousing and the solutions that I think you are driving toward, pardon the expression. I mean, I'm a casual carpool veteran from El Cerrito del Norte back in the early 90s and from Orinda for many years. I just have a question, though, and you kind of just began to address it. I'm a little concerned about potential decrease in revenue to maintain our infrastructure. For example, you're saying trying to work with BATA to get to a point where tolling is eliminated. I'm just kind of wondering then what funding source. I mean, you've obviously got some very smart, creative people. So what funding sources would you suggest as alternatives to tolling? I mean, not just in that specific application, but also we still rely too much on gas taxes for road maintenance, and as we move more toward, as I hope we move toward better utilization of vehicles and not so many single occupancy vehicles, move toward electric cars, how can we come up with a model that's going to provide adequate funding to maintain the infrastructure? Because obviously you're looking at continuing to use the infrastructure more efficiently. But how do we maintain it? How do we fund that? That's what I'm curious about.
It's a good question. I mean, we have our own personal thoughts, but is there a relevant at a federal level when you're talking about taxes? Taxes are a hard thing to do. As you know, gas taxes have been raised in 30 years. First of all, we're not against tolling. We believe you should toll like crazy. We think every new road built should be a toll road. Actually, that's what we promote to Victor Mendez all the time. But the argument behind that is that we say every road you build from now on should be a toll road, but you should give a free pass to carpoolers because they're doing the right thing. They're the ones who are reducing your maintenance costs. The cost on a road in Caltrans, 15 cents per mile per month or something like that. But the idea is that you need to reduce that maintenance cost, and it's based on weight. 2 people in a car, 3 people in a car, 4 people in a car is the same maintenance cost as 1. So you should benefit and incentivize that behavior. I'm not the wrong person to ask to tell you how to fund your federal highway system, but obviously as we move more towards electric cars, you can't be charging gas tax because there's not going to be any gas at some point. So being a proud Texan, I don't think it's anytime really soon, but I do believe that you do need to find some other model. Again, we're not against toll roads. We think toll roads are fantastic because if you are willing to pay, you can get a fast express ride to where you're going. But we do believe that you need to provide a perk, a benefit, especially you think about ladders of accessibility, the underprivileged, of people who can't afford to drive in the quote-unquote Lexus lane. Hey, if you carpool, it's free. and that's Texas' motto. If you carpool, it's absolutely free, this nice highway. And back to your funding level, the toll authorities that we work with are generally bonded measures. So by definition, they can't give away money. So they couldn't just give away a rebate unless they had a federal grant for it, or they could prove that it's revenue positive. And I think this pilot in Texas, and the report from TTI was, they all had the same fear as you. Is, well, you give toll rebates for carpooling, you're going to lose money. And the actual response and fact of it is they increased the revenue 7% from those same users. And the reason is those users were not using the toll road. They were driving on the free general purpose lane all the time. Now they got toll discounts. They started using it. They realized they were saving 15, 20, 30 minutes each way. They realized, well, maybe I have to pay sometimes, but it's still worth that time savings. They just weren't using it before. So I think the proof is in the pudding of you got to test it and measure the results. So I'm not here to say BATA should remove all bridge tolls for carpoolers. That's what the test is about. It's a hypothesis. It's an assumption. But until you offer it, until you measure it, until you test it, you never really know. We argued with them before they introduced that bridge toll that it was a disaster. They would kill casual carpooling. And we tell them all the time, we told you so. Because casual carpooling has never recovered. It's still almost half of its peak levels, 4 or 5 years ago. And the reason is you still have a time advantage, but you took away half of the financial perk to a driver. And the reality is we're coin operated.
Question? One of the concerns I've heard, especially these ad hoc parking lots where people can leave their car all day and get in with another person. I've seen some of these around. Concern I've heard is security, safety. And right now there doesn't seem to be any. And people are reluctant to use them because they may be the last person there at night. And so someone else is there that's not interested in their welfare. How do you address that with some of your operations, or do you?
It's hard. I mean, part of the selection of a meeting point is going out and scoping it, because some of these park and ride lots, I know there's a new one in Martinez, for example. If someone's from Martinez, that's not being heavily, you're from Martinez, that's not being utilized, I think, so far by the bus agencies. I mean, that would be, it's well lit, and it's a newer one, right? It's a more modern.
Right.
Versus some of the older ones. You're right. I as a man, I wouldn't want to be there alone, at night. And so that's part of the process of uplifting a corridor, like what we've been doing with Peter on the Scioto corridor. Where are we going to try to target? And your park and ride, that new one, is one that we're targeting, by the way. But those are all kind of inputs. Now, when our peer-to-peer carpooling, you can just talk to your partner and say, hey, I'll pick you up at Starbucks. But when we do these fleet-based systems where we want to park a bunch of cars, I mean, these are high-end cars. These are $40,000 cars with a lot of amenities in them, telematics on board. Now, we'll know if it's being broken into or stolen, but still don't want that to happen. But that's why with SFMTA, our partnership is we've picked the parking garages. We've marked out strategic reserve spots that are in visible location from that agent sitting at the counter, things like that. But it's a hard task.
Have you thought about using closed-circuit TV to record just to record the area to get information?
Well, our cars all have dash cams inside and out.
Not the car, the lot.
The lot, yeah. I mean, that requires the city, right, to put in the infrastructure and stuff. Yeah.
Or you.
Or Caltrans. Right?
Or you.
We would do it if we have the right-of-way. But, yeah, I mean, some of these parking rides are run by Caltrans and some are run by the cities, like in your case. So it's kind of a hit or miss. In the case of San Ramon, we weren't allowed to put in the beacons. We just put in the signs. So each city is a little bit different.
So, and a statement. I started using Karma a couple of years ago.
Karma, I got to give you swag before you leave.
Yeah, it worked. I was surprised. But at any rate, has there been enough time to develop any statistics on the crimes involved with Karma? Like, you hear a lot about problems with Uber drivers and so on and so forth. Has there been any incidences enough to even document?
I'm proud to say that we've had no crimes reported in our network globally, anywhere in the globe, and we've never had a cease and desist letter either.
Yeah, I'm just, it's a conceptual thing, and I'm sure it just takes a little bit of mind training.
I think it's a numbers game. So when you think about Uber drivers or taxi drivers, they're driving around all day long or 4 or 5 hours at a time, round and round. I mean, think about the number of strangers you're getting in a car versus you use Karma, how many times you use it. it is the risk, I think, increases based
Well,
on
I'm just thinking of the first axe murderer and serial killer and whatnot,
Right.
or terrorist event, and you, much less not knowing your neighbor, what they're really like. You really don't know who that rideshare person is, so there's a fear there.
Yeah, no, it was the number one question we had when we first started in 2009. We heard it all the time, and I think Uber and Lyft actually did us a favor in that way, in the sense that that kind of stigma isn't the first thing out of your mind. You think about it, but it's like the third or fourth thing now, not the very first thing.
Yeah,
and then the fleet vehicles, we're conscious of this, and that's why the fleet vehicles, we put these dash cams inside and out. So we can't stop a crime, but if a crime occurs, at least historically, we can provide the police with something.
Yeah,
to
my
help
first
preserve.
rideshare person was a female, and I think I felt more uncomfortable than she did because she didn't know who I was.
Right.
So I don't know. I'm just.
But that's why casual carpooling works so well, safety in numbers. Casual carpooling works because there's two, and then you get in as 3 and 4. You feel more secure. These are surveys we do with the women primarily here that people are more concerned. But women feel more safe when there's 4 people in a car as opposed to what you just described, which is you're the only other person in this car. And that's also a big difference in like a TNC, which is a taxi, and usually it's just one person versus casual carpooling or carpooling where you're generally trying to fill that car up to get in the HOV lanes. And again, HOV3 drives that decision.
Question, Mr. Chair. So to speak to that, I know that some of the taxi ones like Uber, and they have profiles that you have to fill out, backgrounding that happens. So there could be some type of profile that's set up where you are backgrounding somebody, so you know that the person that you're getting into the car with is, I don't know, safe or whatever.
Right.
But so there are, it costs more, but there are ways to get people to register it. And my second question, or that was the first statement, but question, have you approached buses? Because it seems like with your app, you're going to be collecting a lot of people, a lot of riders. Like, let's just say from I don't know, Hercules to the city. Is there a way to maybe join up with buses that have, a bus sitting in the lot that can maybe grab 50 people and take them in? Is that something you've explored, or is that something that maybe you're looking at doing? Because I know that there's several agencies out here that have a bus or two that go through, but it seems that your app is a lot more inviting to people to carpool. And is there any way to kind of connect those two? Or is there any?
We've done it for like specific events. So during BART strike in 2013,
Right.
we worked with MTC and Contra Costa, and they commandeered a bunch of buses, and we basically you booked a carpool trip, but it was a bus driver driving 50 of you. But we don't, and then we collaborate with, I have to say County Connection is fantastic, but I think the only reason why we are able to collaborate with them honestly is because they're under the same control as Contra Costa Transportation Authority. The general premise or response of a public transportation agency is to be defensive for carpooling. It has nothing to do with us or Uber. Even long before Uber was around, we'd still get the wall put up. And the reason is, in America, the funding cycles are set up in such a way that technically the transit agencies not only compete with each other, they're competing with the people whose job it is to promote carpooling. And it's really confusing, but the reality is generally they don't like carpooling. I mean, it's strange, but that's true. County Connection is a unique case because they're under the umbrella of County Connection. We got to explain. We got to say, hey, look, we're not going to poke your riders. That's not what we're about. We want to help supplement where you're cutting service. There's a Moraga Bay route that we've been talking about. We haven't done yet, but because they're cutting back service. But we can be a complement.
Right.
But the general premise, like Muni and all that, immediately is arms up defense. Now, we've broken down the barriers by working with Contra Costa and County Connection. Muni has now, just like 2 months ago, God bless them, started running ads on their buses for us. But it's a trust factor, and it takes a long time with the public transit agencies. The transportation authorities get it right away, like the CCTAs. But the bus guys generally are defensive because it's always hard about ridership, and they don't want to lose any ridership.
Because I know WestCat, the bus I ride, it's $5 in and $5 out to San Francisco, because I've taken it a couple times. It's called the Lynx.
Yep.
Whereas your regular bus ride is about $1.75. So if you were to grab those people, I mean, there's obviously a fare increase there. So I don't see why. Well, I guess I guess it's just the word carpool.
Yeah,
that
yeah, we
scares
don't we don't target like Barton Strike. We helped
Yeah.
out because the government asked, but we would never stand at Barton and try to poke riders because honestly, in our mission in life, that's the best choice you could possibly have.
Gotcha.
If you take any form of public transit, you're doing the right choice. So keep
Gotcha.
doing it. We don't want you. We want the 85% of Americans who drive alone. Now in the Bay Area, that's less. Fortunately, we have a lot of good infrastructure, but globally in America, 85% of us drive alone. That's our target. That's
Right.
the piece of the pie we're trying to grow. We don't care about poking from buses or van pools. You're making the perfect choice. Keep
Got
doing
it.
it. Yeah. I'm sorry? I'm about to launch in Houston. It's not much different. Texas. Great. Well,
Any
thank you
further
so much.
questions or comments? Well, thank you so much. And, yeah, attending the authority board meetings regularly, I've seen how this whole alternative methods of transportation and special modes of transportation have become more and more important to the authority.
With that, I want to thank you. I know you look formal with a tie, so I'm going to put on my cape before I leave, but thank you very much.
Before you go, do you have a card that I can get?
Yes. I will leave cards in the back there. Okay. Sure. Thank you. I'll wait. You're reading.
Okay, I've done the usual report on the authority board meeting of last week. I won't go over it much in detail. If you don't have a copy, they should be on the table up there. It was interesting, this first year I noticed that there's a whole bunch of non-road building programs that get a percentage of the sales tax revenue each year. So I kind of broke those out in my comments on the consent calendar. The major thing, of course, is the development, continued development of the county transportation plan and incorporating the transportation expenditure plan into that. They're actually going back and taking a second cut at the CTP plan to do a better job of integrating the expenditure plan with it. They're actually going to spend quite a bit extra to take another pass at it. They feel that it will be payoff in the long run. It helps to be in very good odor with MTC. You know, they determine a lot of grants and which way they head. So the authority spends quite a bit of time on taking very good care of its relationships with the Metropolitan Transportation Commission and even the California Transportation Commission. The big thing, one of the big things in the executive director's comments was Congress can't seem to get it together on the Federal Highway Trust Fund. And if they can't, that sucker is expires and is pretty much out of money at the end of July. There's, I think, been talk of possibly getting another short extension through Congress. But it's quite possible that no new federally funded projects will be committed. And if things get really desperate, some ongoing projects may have to be suspended. Transportation Authority doesn't feel greatly at risk yet. It has other funding sources that could keep some of the projects going for a few months. But this does affect everybody's planning. And by the way, they're continuing to stress the fact that they have not made a decision on whether to go in November of 16 with the additional half-cent sales tax. Frankly, I personally, when I look out at what could be on the ballot, then it is going to be an absolute war zone, state level, And I think a lot of local and countywide people may be passing on that particular election. So if there are any questions, I'm available to answer them. If not, comments by individual members of the committee?
I just want to welcome Dennis because I had the chance to work with him in a couple of projects in Orinda, and he is coming to this committee with experience as the chairman of the Orinda Citizens Infrastructure Oversight Commission. So a lot of experience in working with road conditions and, even more importantly, how to fund improvements of those roads. So I kind of encouraged him, even after his move to Moraga, to join this group when a vacancy became available. So I'm very pleased that he is now a member of our committee.
Anything else? If not, I will go ahead and, sorry, we have no correspondence or news clippings. Any suggestions, comments on future agenda items?
Chair, I was given this by one of our planning commissioners. It's a growth management program implementation guide as a reference document that I found. I don't know if anybody else has gotten this. Was this something that it's a 2010? Does this sound familiar?
It looks like it's an authority document.
Yeah, it is. I guess I can show you afterwards. It's really helpful in understanding a lot about this because I'm new to the board, so I went through it. So might help you guys out for some of the people that are new. So.
And of course, there's always the alphabet soup of acronyms.
Right.
Well, if there's nothing else, I'll go ahead and declare us adjourned.